On a phone call with her mom, she said, "Don't worry, I'm just having fun. I'd never marry a baker. Didn't see me standing there." I'm not sure where to start with this. I guess I'll just dive in. My name's Emily, I'm 32, and I run a little bakery called Hearth and Grain in Portland's Alberta Arts District. It's this cozy spot with exposed brick walls, mismatched wooden tables, and a big window where you can watch bikes roll by on Alberta Street. We do sourdough, cinnamon brioche, and these lavender shortbreads that people line up for on weekends. It's not a fancy chain or anything. Most days, it's just me, my assistant Clara, and a couple of part-timers kneading dough and pulling trays from the oven. The work's hard, hands-on, and I'm usually dusted with flour by noon, but I love it. It's like, I don't know, making something real, something people smile over. I've got this one regular, an older guy named Walt, who comes every Thursday for a rye loaf and tells me it reminds him of his mom's bread. That's why I do it. I've been dating Ryan for about a year and a half. He's 30, works at some financial tech startup downtown. We met at the Portland Farmers Market, the one at PSU, when he bought a loaf of my rosemary focaccia. He was wearing this navy blazer, totally out of place among the hemp tote bags and tie-dye. But he had this easy smile and asked me about the bread like he actually cared. We ended up talking for 20 minutes, me rambling about yeast starters while he nodded like it was fascinating. I thought, okay, this guy's different. He's not just some suit. He started coming by the bakery sometimes, leaning on the counter, watching me pipe frosting on cupcakes, saying stuff like, "You're like an artist with that thing." I fell for it. I fell for him. Looking back, I wonder if I ignored some red flags, like how he'd always change the subject when I talked about expanding the bakery. Maybe adding a second location in Selwood or something. Or how he'd get this tight smile when I'd show up to his work events in my favorite denim overalls, the ones with a tiny daisy embroidered on the pocket. I thought I was being myself, you know? Portland's all about that. Beards, tattoos, weird passions. But maybe I was trying too hard to fit into his world. I don't know. It's hard to untangle now. This story's about the Sunday that changed everything. It was just a regular brunch at Ryan's parents' place in Lake Oswego, one of those rituals we'd fallen into. I didn't expect it to be the day I'd see everything clearly, or maybe the day I'd realize I'd been blind for a while. It's still raw thinking about it. Part of me wants to laugh at how absurd it all was, and part of me just feels heavy, like I lost something I didn't even know I was holding on to. Ryan's family is a whole different world from mine. They live in this big house in Lake Oswego, one of those modern ones with floor-to-ceiling windows and a manicured lawn that looks like it belongs in a magazine. You walk in, and there's this sleek kitchen island with a bowl of perfect lemons, like they're staged for a photo shoot. His mom, Karen, is a corporate lawyer, always in tailored blouses, even on weekends. His dad, Greg, runs a financial advisory firm and has this warm, distracted energy, like he's half thinking about stock portfolios while he's talking to you. They're nice enough, but it's clear they value things like legacy and networking. My parents back in Ohio are teachers, and their idea of a big night is pizza and board games. I never thought that gap mattered, but maybe it did. Karen was always polite to me, but it felt like she was sizing me up. She'd ask about the bakery, Hearth and Grain, like it was a hobby I'd grow out of. "Have you considered franchising, Emily? Or maybe consulting for a larger brand?" she'd say, stirring her coffee with this little silver spoon. I'd try to explain that I like the hands-on stuff, mixing dough, tweaking recipes, seeing people's faces when they bite into a fresh scone. But her eyes would glaze over, and she'd pivot to talking about Ryan's latest project at his startup. I should have seen it then, I guess. She wasn't mean, just dismissive. Like my work was a cute side hustle, not a life. Greg was different. He'd sneak extra pastries from the brunch spread and wink at me, saying, "Don't tell Karen I'm cheating on my diet." He'd ask about my profit margins or how I source my flour, and it felt genuine, like he saw the bakery as a real business. One time, he even showed me his vintage record collection in their den, rows of jazz and folk albums in this wood-paneled room that smelled like cedar. I thought, okay, maybe I can fit in here. Maybe I'm overthinking Karen's vibe. Ryan, though, I don't know. He was so charming at first. He'd show up at the bakery with coffee from Stumptown, sit on a stool by the counter, and watch me roll out dough. He'd say things like, "You make this look effortless." And I'd blush, thinking he got it. He even helped me repaint the bakery's front door this bright mustard yellow last summer. Both of us splattered with paint, laughing like kids. But there were moments that didn't sit right. Like when he'd introduce me at his work events as Emily, my girlfriend, but never mention the bakery. Or how he'd tense up when I'd talk about my dream of teaching baking classes someday. "That's a lot of work for not much return," he'd say, and I'd brush it off, thinking he was just being practical. I wonder now if he was already pulling away even then. Maybe he liked the idea of me, a quirky baker with flour in her hair, but not the reality. His startup's all about disrupting finance, whatever that means, and his coworkers are these polished types who talk about IPOs and ski trips to Aspen. I'd show up to their happy hours in my denim overalls, a little self-conscious but trying to own it, and Ryan would smile but keep his distance, like he didn't want to be seen too close to me. I told myself it was just his work mode, that he was still the guy who'd eat my failed muffin experiments at 2 a.m. in my tiny apartment kitchen. We started doing Sunday brunches at his parents' place maybe 6 months into dating. It became this routine: drive down from my place in Northeast Portland, park my beat-up Subaru in their pristine driveway, and walk into a spread of quiche, smoked salmon, and these fancy little fruit tarts Karen bought from a patisserie in West Lynn. I'd bring a tray of my own pastries, like cardamom rolls or lemon scones, hoping to impress them. Greg would rave about them, but Karen would just nod and say, "Very nice, Emily," before moving on to talk about her latest case. Ryan would squeeze my hand under the table, and I'd think, this is fine. I'm part of his life. But I wasn't. Not really. I see that now. I was trying so hard to be what they wanted, cheerful, accommodating, not too artsy, that I didn't notice how much I was shrinking myself. I'd leave those brunches feeling exhausted like I'd been performing. And Ryan? He never seemed to notice. Or maybe he did, and it was easier for him that way. I don't know. I keep going back and forth on it, wondering if I was naive or if he was just good at pretending. Either way, that last Sunday brunch was the one that broke it all open. That Sunday started out so normal, it's almost funny to think about now. Ryan and I got to his parents' place in Lake Oswego around 11 in the morning. The air was crisp, that early fall bite you get in Portland, and I remember pulling my scarf tighter as we walked up their stone path. Their house looked perfect as always, those big windows reflecting the gray sky, a few golden leaves scattered on the lawn. Inside, it smelled like coffee and roasted tomatoes. Karen had outdone herself with brunch, a spinach quiche with a flaky crust, a tray of smoked salmon with capers, and a bowl of berries that looked too pretty to eat. I'd brought a batch of my cardamom rolls, still warm in their tin, hoping maybe this time Karen would say more than, "Very nice." We sat around their dining table, this long slab of polished walnut with a view of Mount Hood in the distance, all snowy and quiet. Greg was telling a story about a client who'd lost a fortune on some crypto scheme, and Ryan was laughing, tossing in comments about dumb money. I was mostly listening, nodding, trying to keep up with their finance talk. I'm not clueless about money. Running a bakery means I deal with invoices and taxes, but their world felt so far from mine. I kept glancing at Ryan, wondering if he noticed how I didn't quite fit. He was wearing this crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, looking like he belonged in that house, that life. I was in my usual overalls, the ones with the daisy on the pocket, and I felt a little like a kid playing dress-up. Around 1 in the afternoon, Ryan's phone buzzed. It was Matt, his old college friend who'd moved to Seattle. Ryan's face lit up. "Matt, man, it's been forever." He stood up, already laughing, and said he'd take the call in the living room. The living room's just off the dining area, separated by this wide archway, all open and airy with a cream-colored sofa and a glass coffee table. I could hear Ryan's voice, loud and easy, as he caught up with Matt. Something about a new job, a bar they used to hit up. Greg and I started clearing the table, stacking plates and carrying them to the kitchen. I was rinsing a few forks when Ryan called out, "Mom, come say hi. Matt's asking about you." Karen wiped her hands on a dish towel and headed to the living room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I finished up in the kitchen, the dishwasher humming, and realized I'd left my scarf on the coat rack by the front door. It's this old wool thing my mom knitted, kind of frayed but soft, and I didn't want to forget it. The coat rack's right by the living room entrance, so I walked that way, not thinking much of it. Ryan and Karen were on the couch, the phone propped on the coffee table, Matt's face grinning from the screen. I was about to grab my scarf when I heard Matt say, "So you and Emily, pretty serious, huh?" Ryan's voice dropped, not a whisper but quieter, like he thought the walls wouldn't carry it. "Emily? Yeah, she's great. But don't worry, Mom, I'm just having fun. I'd never actually marry a baker. Can you imagine me bringing a flour-dusted pastry chef to the firm's gala? She's cool for now, but I'm not settling." Karen laughed. This sharp little sound and said, "Good. I was starting to think you were getting too serious. A bakery's cute, but it's not exactly partner material." I stopped dead, my hand on the scarf. It was like the air got sucked out of the room. My chest felt tight, but not like I was going to cry. It was more like everything just slowed down. I could see them through the archway, Ryan slouched on the couch, Karen sitting straight-backed, neither of them looking my way. Matt was laughing on the screen, saying something I couldn't hear over the buzzing in my head. I wanted to walk in, say something clever, call Ryan out right there, but my feet wouldn't move. Part of me thought, maybe I misheard. Maybe he's joking. He helped me paint the bakery door, didn't he? He ate my burned muffins and said he loved them. But then Karen's words echoed, partner material, and I knew I hadn't misheard. I don't know how long I stood there, probably just a few seconds, but it felt like forever. I kept thinking, what do I do? Do I pretend I didn't hear? Do I leave? I was so mad at myself for even hesitating, like I was supposed to protect his feelings or something. Finally, I grabbed my scarf, walked back to the kitchen, and told Greg I had to head out early. "Big day at the bakery tomorrow," I said, my voice weirdly steady. He looked surprised, but just nodded and said, "Drive safe." I slipped out the side door, past their perfect lawn, and got into my Subaru. The whole drive back to Northeast Portland, I kept replaying those words, just having fun, never marry a baker. By the time I parked outside my apartment, I wasn't even sad, I was just awake. Driving back to my apartment that Sunday, the city looked different somehow. Portland's always gray this time of year, with rain smearing the windshield and neon signs glowing on Alberta Street. But it felt heavier, like the clouds were pressing down on me. My place is this second-floor walk-up above a vintage record store, with creaky wood floors and a tiny kitchen where I test recipes late at night. I got home, tossed my scarf on the couch, and just sat there on my faded blue armchair, staring at the fern I keep forgetting to water. I wasn't crying or anything. I just felt empty. Like I'd been carrying this idea of us for 18 months, and now it was gone. And I didn't know what to do with my hands. I kept replaying Ryan's words. Just having fun. Never marry a baker. Part of me wanted to call him, scream, ask why he'd let me think we were serious. But another part, the louder one, was just tired. Tired of trying to fit into his world. Tired of pretending I didn't notice Karen's side eye or Ryan's half-hearted compliments. I thought about all the times I'd brought pastries to their brunches, hoping to win them over, and how stupid that felt now. I'd even started buying fancier clothes for those events, a silk blouse I couldn't really afford, just to look less like the flour-dusted girl Ryan laughed about. God, why did I do that? Monday morning, I was at Hearth and Grain by 4 a.m., the bakery still dark except for the glow of the ovens. Kneading dough is good for thinking. The rhythm of it, push, fold, turn, calms me down. I was working on a big order for a wedding, 200 mini tarts with lemon curd and blackberry jam, and the focus kept me from spiraling. But every time I stopped to sip my coffee, Ryan's voice crept back in. I wondered if I'd overreacted. Maybe I should have confronted him right there, given him a chance to explain. I even pulled out my phone to text him, typed out, "Hey, we need to talk," but then deleted it. What was there to say? He'd already said the truth. Around 9 a.m., Ryan texted, "Hey, you left early yesterday. Everything okay?" My stomach twisted. Part of me wanted to believe he was clueless, that he didn't know I'd heard. I typed back, "Just busy. Big order this week." He replied, "Cool. Dinner tonight? I can come by." I stared at the message for a good 5 minutes, my thumb hovering over the screen. I wanted to say yes, to slip back into our routine, pretend everything was fine, but I couldn't. "Working late," I texted. "Maybe later." He didn't push it, and I felt this weird mix of relief and disappointment, like maybe he didn't care enough to try harder. The next few days, I started untangling our lives, little by little. Tuesday, I went to Ryan's apartment in the Pearl District. It's one of those sleek high-rises with a doorman and a gym nobody uses. He was at work, so I let myself in with the key he'd given me. I'd left a few things there over the months: a spare mixer, a rolling pin, a notebook where I sketch cake designs. I packed them into a canvas tote, trying not to look at the couch where we'd watched old Wes Anderson movies, or the fridge with my favorite IPA he'd always stock. I left the key on the counter next to his fancy espresso machine and walked out. It felt final, but also like I was betraying something, like I should have given him a heads up. Was that fair? I don't know. Wednesday, I did something practical, which felt good. I updated my bank and insurance info. I'd made Ryan my emergency contact last year after he offered, saying, "You're family now." It seemed sweet then, but now it made my skin crawl. I sat at my rickety kitchen table filling out forms online and wondered if I was being petty. Maybe I was cutting him out too fast, but then I remembered Karen's laugh, that sharp little sound, and kept going. Thursday, Karen called. I was in the bakery piping buttercream onto cupcakes when her name popped up on my phone. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got me. "Emily, is everything all right?" she asked, her voice all concern, like she was talking to a client. "Ryan said you've been distant." I froze, a dollop of frosting smudging on the counter, so he hadn't told her. "Just swamped at the bakery," I said, trying to sound normal. She pushed. "You'll be at brunch this Sunday, right? We missed you last week." I mumbled something about being booked up, that brunches weren't fitting my schedule anymore. She sounded confused, maybe a little hurt, and I felt a pang of guilt. Karen wasn't the bad guy, was she? Or was she? I hung up, my head spinning, and went back to the cupcakes, piping too fast, messing up a few. Clara noticed and asked if I was okay. I just nodded and kept going. I wasn't okay, not really. I was mad. At Ryan, at myself, at the whole situation. But I was also scared. Scared that maybe he was right. That my life, this bakery, these tarts, this flour-dusted mess, wasn't enough for someone like him. And if it wasn't enough for him, would it be enough for anyone? I pushed that thought down, but it kept creeping back, especially at night when I was alone in my apartment. The record store downstairs playing some mournful jazz through the floorboards. By Friday, I was a mess of nerves, even if I didn't want to admit it. The bakery was buzzing. Friday afternoons in the Alberta Arts District are always hectic, with people spilling out of coffee shops and art galleries, grabbing pastries for the weekend. Hearth and Grain smelled like warm butter and vanilla, and I was in the back piping buttercream roses onto a dozen cupcakes for a baby shower order. My hands were steady, but my head wasn't. I kept checking my phone, half expecting Ryan to text, half dreading it. He'd been quiet since my last message, and I wasn't sure if that made me feel better or worse. Like, was he giving me space, or had he already moved on? I hated that I even cared. Around 3 p.m., the bell above the bakery door jingled, and there he was. Ryan, in his usual work outfit, navy slacks, a crisp button-down, looking like he'd just stepped out of a meeting. Clara was at the register chatting with a customer, so I couldn't duck into the back without making it obvious. He caught my eye and gave this hesitant smile, like he wasn't sure if he was welcome. "Hey, Emily," he said, leaning against the counter. "Got a minute?" I wiped my hands on my apron, flour smudging the denim, and nodded. "Sure. Out here?" I gestured to the front where a few customers were sitting at tables, sipping coffee and reading. He shook his head. "Maybe in the back?" I led him to the kitchen, past the racks of cooling scones and a mixer whirring with cookie dough. The kitchen's my sanctuary. Stainless steel counters, bags of flour stacked in the corner, a chalkboard with my weekly specials scrawled in pink chalk. But with Ryan there, it felt smaller, like he was taking up too much air. I crossed my arms and looked at him. "What's up?" My voice came out sharper than I meant, and I saw him flinch. "You've been off since Sunday," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Distant. I feel like you're avoiding me. Are we okay?" I wanted to laugh, but it caught in my throat. Are we okay? After what he said? But then I looked at him, his worried eyes, the way he was fidgeting with his watch, and I wavered. Maybe I'd blown this out of proportion. Maybe he didn't mean it the way it sounded. I took a breath and said, "I'm just busy, Ryan. The bakery's been crazy." It was a cop-out, and I knew it. I could have called him out right then, but something held me back. Fear, maybe, or just not wanting to hear him confirm it. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Emily, come on, I know you. This isn't just work. Did I do something?" That's when it hit me, how easy it would be to let this slide, to keep pretending. But I couldn't, not anymore. I looked down at my hands, still dusted with flour, and said, "I heard you on Sunday, at your parents' house. You told your mom you're just having fun with me, that you'd never marry a baker, that I'm not partner material." My voice cracked on that last part, and I hated it, hated how small I sounded. Ryan's face went pale, like he'd been caught stealing. "Emily, It wasn't like that." He took a step back, bumping into a stack of mixing bowls that clattered softly. "I was just talking to Matt, joking around. My mom's been on my case about settling down, and I said something stupid to shut her up." I stared at him, trying to read his face. Was he lying? His eyes were wide, pleading, but there was this tightness in his jaw, like he was scrambling. "Joking," I said. "You laughed about bringing a flour-dusted pastry chef to your firm's gala. You meant it, Ryan. You're embarrassed by what I do." "No, I'm not," he said too fast. "I love your bakery. I love what you do. You're amazing at it." He reached for my hand, but I pulled back, my apron catching on the counter's edge. "Then why say it?" I asked. "Why tell your mom I'm just a fling? You've been stringing me along for a year and a half, letting me think we were building something." My voice was shaking now, and I felt this hot mix of anger and shame. Shame for believing in him, for thinking I could be part of his world. Ryan looked down, his shoulders slumping. "It's not about you," he said quietly. "It's my family. My mom's got these expectations about who I should be with, what my life should look like. I was trying to keep her off my back. I didn't mean it." He looked up, and for a second, I saw something real in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or fear. Like he was torn between what he wanted and what his family wanted. But then he added, "You know how she is. You've seen it at brunch." And that did it. Blaming Karen? After he'd said those words? "Don't," I said, holding up a hand. "Don't put this on your mom. You said it, Ryan. You meant it. You're ashamed of me, of my work, of this." I gestured at the kitchen, the flour, the chalkboard. I deserve someone who's proud of what I do, not someone who sees it as a cute hobby until something better comes along. My words felt strong, but inside I was crumbling. What if no one else would want this life? What if he was right and my bakery wasn't enough? Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it. "Emily, please," he said finally. "Can we just talk this out? I messed up, I know, but I don't want to lose you." I looked at him, standing there in my kitchen, and I wanted to believe him. I wanted to go back to the nights we'd spent eating takeout on his couch, planning a trip to the Oregon coast, but I couldn't unhear his words. "We're done," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Please go." He stood there for a moment, like he thought I'd change my mind, then nodded and walked out, the bell jingling as the door closed. I stood in the kitchen staring at the cupcakes, the buttercream roses now lopsided from my shaking hands. Clara poked her head in, her ponytail swinging. "You okay, Em?" I nodded, but my throat was too tight to speak. I grabbed a rag and started wiping the counter. Even though it was already clean, I kept thinking, did I do the right thing? Was I too harsh? Maybe I should have given him a chance to explain more. But then I remembered Karen's laugh and Ryan's voice, so casual, so sure, and I knew I couldn't go back. The weekend after that confrontation felt like wading through fog. I woke up Saturday morning in my apartment, the usual hum of the record store downstairs replaced by this weird quiet. I made coffee in my chipped yellow mug and stood by the window, watching people line up at the food carts on Alberta Street. Normally, I'd be at the bakery by now, but I'd given Clara the reins for the morning shift. I needed a minute to breathe, to figure out what I was feeling. I wasn't heartbroken exactly, more like I'd lost my balance and didn't know how to stand up straight again. I kept thinking about Ryan's face in the kitchen, that guilty look, and wondering if I'd been too quick to end things. What if he really was just trying to appease his mom? But then I'd hear his voice again. Never marry a baker. And my stomach would twist, and I'd know I did the right thing, or at least I hoped I did. Sunday, Karen called. I was back at Hearth and Grain, shaping sourdough loaves on the counter, the radio playing some indie folk song that matched my mood. Her name on my phone screen made my heart skip, like I was in trouble. I let it ring twice before picking up, wiping flour off my hands. "Emily, what's going on?" she said, her voice all lawyerly calm. "Ryan's been moping around, saying you two had a fight. Did something happen?" I almost laughed. A fight? That's what he called it? I leaned against the counter, the wood cool under my palms, and said, "It wasn't a fight, Karen. I heard him on Sunday. He told you he's just having fun with me, that he'd never marry a baker, that I'm not partner material." I waited for her to deny it, to say I'd misunderstood. There was a long pause, and I could hear her breathing, like she was choosing her words. "I didn't realize you heard that," she said finally. "I thought he was just venting to Matt. I didn't think he meant it like that." Her voice softened, but it didn't help. "He meant it," I said. "And you laughed, Karen. You agreed with him." Another pause. "Emily, I'm sorry," she said. "I wasn't thinking. I've been hard on Ryan about his future, and I guess I got caught up in the moment." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to forgive her. She sounded genuine, and I'd always liked her, even with her judgy comments. But another part was so tired of their whole world, where my bakery was just a cute thing to pat on the head. "I appreciate the apology," I said, "but I'm done with all of it." I hung up before she could say more, my hands shaking as I set the phone down. I'd never been that blunt with her before. It felt good, but also like I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Monday brought more noise. Ryan's sister, Lauren, texted me. She's 26, works in marketing, and always seemed to like me. She'd even asked me to make cupcakes for her friend's bachelorette party last spring. Her message was long, full of exclamation points. "Emily, what's going on? Ryan's a wreck. He said you dumped him over some dumb comment he made to Mom. Can't you guys just talk it out? He really cares about you." I stared at the words, sitting on my couch with a half-eaten scone from yesterday's batch. I wanted to write back something sharp to tell her exactly what her brother said, but I didn't. Instead, I typed, "Lauren, he said he's embarrassed by my work. That's not a dumb comment. I'm sorry he's upset, but I'm not." I hit send and immediately regretted it. Was I being too cold? Should I have explained more? I don't know. I just didn't have the energy to make everyone feel better about this. Word started spreading, which I guess was inevitable. By Tuesday, I got a message from one of Ryan's co-workers, this guy named Derek who I'd met at a happy hour once. "Heard you and Ryan split," he wrote. "Sucks. But you're kind of overreacting, right? He's a good dude, just said something stupid." I didn't reply. I was at the Portland Saturday Market, setting up my stall with baskets of muffins and shortbreads, the air thick with the smell of roasted coffee and tamales from nearby vendors. I kept thinking, why is this my fault? Why am I the one who's supposed to forgive and forget? But then I'd second-guess myself. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe I was making too big a deal out of it. I sold out of muffins by noon, but I barely noticed. My head was so full of noise. The worst part was how it messed with my work. I love the bakery. It's my home, my heart. But that week, I kept screwing up. I burned a tray of scones because I forgot to set the timer. I snapped at Clara when she asked if we should reorder almond extract, which I never do. She's like family. I'd catch myself staring at the chalkboard in the kitchen, where I'd written, "Try rosemary lemon tarts," in pink chalk, and wonder if this was all I'd ever be. A baker. A flour-dusted pastry chef, who wasn't enough for someone like Ryan. I hated that he'd gotten in my head like that. I hated that I let him. Then Greg called, out of nowhere, on Wednesday. I was locking up the bakery, the streetlights buzzing on Alberta Street, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. "Emily," he said, his voice warm but careful. "I heard what happened. I'm sorry my son was an idiot. Karen told me about the call and, well, I wish you hadn't heard that." I leaned against the bakery's mustard yellow door, my keys jangling in my hand. "Yeah, me too," I said. He went on. "You're always welcome here, you know, with or without Ryan. Those cardamom rolls of yours are the best thing about brunch." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "Thanks, Greg. That means a lot." He paused, then added, "Karen feels awful. She's been reading about artisan baking online, trying to understand what you do. She didn't mean to hurt you." I didn't know what to say to that. It was nice, I guess, but it didn't fix anything. I told him I'd think about coming by sometime, but as I hung up, I wasn't sure if I meant it. I went home that night and sat on my couch, the fern still drooping in its pot. I thought about calling my mom in Ohio, telling her everything, but I didn't. I didn't want to hear her say I'd find someone better, even if she was right. I just wanted to sit with it, with this ache that wasn't quite sadness but wasn't anger either. I kept thinking, what now? I'd walked away from Ryan, from his family, from that whole life. But what was I walking toward? I didn't have an answer, and that scared me more than anything. It's been about a month since that Sunday at Ryan's parents' house, and I'm still sorting through what it all means. Some days I feel strong, like I dodged a bullet. Others I catch myself wondering if I could have handled it differently, maybe talked it out more, given Ryan a chance to make it right. But then I remember the way he said, "flour-dusted pastry chef," so casual, like it was a punchline, and I know I made the right call. It's just hard to trust that sometimes, especially when I'm alone in my apartment, the record store downstairs playing some slow jazz that makes everything feel heavier. A week after our breakup, Karen texted, asking if I'd come to brunch. "Ryan won't be there," she wrote. "Just us. We'd love to see you." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to go. Greg's warm laugh, those cardamom rolls he loved. It'd be easy to slip back into that routine. But another part felt like it'd be betraying myself, like I'd be pretending nothing happened. I texted back, "Thanks, but I'm swamped at the bakery. Maybe another time." I don't know if I meant it. I wanted to mean it, but the idea of sitting at their polished walnut table, knowing what Ryan said, made my chest tight. I did end up going to their house a couple of weeks later, though. Greg called and practically begged, saying, "Karen's making that quiche you like, and I'm outnumbered without you." I laughed, and something about his voice, steady, kind, made me say yes. Driving to Lake Oswego, my Subaru rattling over the bridge, I was nervous, like I was walking into a test I hadn't studied for. Their house looked the same, all clean lines and perfect lemons, but it felt different without Ryan there. Karen greeted me with a hug, which surprised me, and said, "Emily, I'm so glad you came." Her voice was softer than usual, no lawyerly edge. Greg handed me a coffee, grinning, and we sat in their dining room, Mount Hood glowing in the distance. We talked about normal things: Greg's golf game, Karen's book club, the new brew pub opening in West Lynn. It was nice, almost too nice, like we were all tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. Before I left, Karen pulled me aside in the kitchen, her hands fidgeting with a dish towel. "Emily," she said, "I owe you an apology. I didn't realize how much my attitude about your work, about you, hurt you. I looked up your bakery online, read some reviews. People love what you do. I was wrong to treat it like a hobby." I was caught off guard. I mumbled something about appreciating it, but inside, I was torn. It felt good to hear, but it also reminded me of all those brunches where I'd felt small. I thanked her and drove home, my head a jumble of gratitude and resentment. Why couldn't she have seen that before? The bakery's been my anchor through all this. Hearth and Grain is busier than ever. 3 wedding orders this month, plus a feature in a local food blog that sent a swarm of new customers. I'm experimenting with new recipes, like those rosemary lemon tarts I'd scribbled on the chalkboard. Walt, my regular, tried one and said it was damn near poetry, which made me laugh for the first time in days. But I still have moments where I doubt myself. Last week, I was kneading dough at 5 a.m., the oven's humming, and I thought, what if Ryan was right? What if this is all I'll ever be? I shook it off, but it lingers. That fear that my life's too small for someone to love. Then there's Chris. I met him at the Portland Saturday Market a couple of weeks ago. He's 34, a ceramicist who makes these gorgeous speckled plates for restaurants around town. He bought a loaf of my sourdough and asked about my starter. Not in a polite way, but like he really wanted to know. We got to talking about clay and yeast, about how making things with your hands feels like magic. He came by the bakery the next day, his flannel shirt rolled up, and watched me decorate a cake, asking questions that didn't feel like small talk. We're not dating, not exactly, but we've been texting, and last weekend we hiked in Forest Park, the trails muddy and quiet. He didn't care that I showed up in my beat-up sneakers or that I rambled about bread. It's new, and I'm trying not to overthink it, but it feels possible. Like maybe I don't have to shrink myself to be enough. Ryan tried one last time, about 3 weeks after we broke up. He showed up at the bakery with a folder of papers, looking nervous, his hair a little messy. "Emily, I've been thinking," he said, standing by the counter while Clara pretended not to eavesdrop. "I want to invest in Hearth and Grain, help you expand, maybe open a second location." I almost dropped the tray of muffins I was holding. I looked at him in his pressed shirt, clutching that folder like it was a lifeline, and I laughed. Not a mean laugh, just disbelieving. "Ryan," I said, "a month ago, you called my work a fling. Now you want to invest? Why?" He stammered. "I believe in you. I've been reading about the artisan food scene, and I think you could go big." I shook my head. "You didn't believe in me when it mattered. You can't buy your way back now." He left, the folder still in his hand, and I felt a strange mix of pity and relief. Word got around, as it does in Portland. Ryan's been telling people I overreacted, that it was just a misunderstanding. But Karen and Greg have been setting the story straight. At some family dinner, Lauren tried to defend Ryan, saying I was being too harsh, but Karen shut it down. He said what he said, she told everyone, and Emily deserved better. Greg's been even blunter, telling his golf buddies Ryan lost a good woman because he didn't appreciate her. I didn't ask for that kind of loyalty, but it means something, knowing they see me for who I am now. I'm not going to lie. It's not all tidy and resolved. I still drive by Ryan's building in the Pearl District sometimes, on my way to a supplier, and feel a pang. I wonder if he's okay, if he's learned anything. I wonder if I'm being too stubborn, shutting out his family when they're trying to make amends. But then I walk into Hearth and Grain, see Clara laughing with a customer, smell the bread baking, and I feel grounded again. This is my life. Flour in my hair, tarts on the counter, a chalkboard full of ideas. It's enough, or it's getting there. Chris texted me yesterday asking if I want to check out a new pottery exhibit at the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry. I said yes, even though I'm nervous, even though I don't know what this is yet. I'm trying to trust that I don't have to be perfect, that my work, my life is worth loving. Ryan thought I was a placeholder, someone to fill the space until he found partner material. He was wrong. I'm not a placeholder. I'm just Emily, and I'm figuring it out, one loaf at a time.